Thank you so much for listening to American Medicine Today. I am Kimberly Bonati alongside Ethan Euchre, Jeff Wagstaff, and world-renowned orthopedic surgeon Dr. Alfred Bonati. For the first time in history, the world shut itself down by choice, all over fear of a virus that was not well understood. And joining us to discuss is Jay Richards, co-author of The Price of Panic, How the Tyranny of Experts Turned a Pandemic into a Catastrophe. Thank you for being with us, Jay.
My pleasure. Great to be with you.
Of course. Now, Jay, how much did the media, mainstream, social, or otherwise, play into spreading the panic that essentially led to complete shutdown?
They played the key role, actually. I mean, the fact that we know public health officials on a first-name basis, people like Dr. Anthony Fauci, it was the media that broadcast that. One indication of how powerful the media is, a poll in July actually asked Americans what percentage of the population they thought had died from COVID-19 in the previous few months. The average guess was 9%. Well, the right answer is 0.06%. So in other words, Americans believe the virus is 150 times more deadly than it actually is. Obviously, nobody's reading the CDC website. They're not reading science papers. The American public got that impression entirely from the media and from social media.
And how was it that these politicians who know nothing about science became to, speculate on this disease or virus rather, and the fact that we should be shutting things down?
I mean, it's very strange, but the reality is that, of course, if a president or a governor has to deal with a pandemic, it's not like he or she says, okay, let me gather together the smartest people on this particular issue and I'll get them to weigh in. They just have public health officials that, in the case of President Trump, you inherit public health officials who are part of the regular career service in the federal government. That's actually what happened. And then, unfortunately, those few public health officials believed this highly speculative computer model out of the Imperial College London, which said that the coronavirus had an infection fatality rate of 3.4%. We knew within literally weeks that model was completely unfounded in terms of what it was assuming. Unfortunately, by that time, everybody was believing the worst case scenario. And so President Trump, when he was asked in April why he decided to advise lockdowns, he said, well, two very smart people in my room told me 2.2 million Americans were going to die unless we shut it down. That's a problem I think we're going to have to work on for the next time. We don't want two or three public health officials who happen to be basically following a speculative computer model to be able to have the ear to the very people who can shut the entire economy down.
Yeah, but you know something, why it's possible that in previous pandemics, for the last 2 or 3 that happened in the past, nobody changed any of the behavior of the population or the business. Why this reaction so unilateral and so furious that create the commotion that force the system to react to close the business and close practically the whole world?
Yeah, that's right. It's a couple of things, really. First, this idea of a general population lockdown, which had never been tested, it actually worked its way through the public health and epidemiological community, actually in the 2000s, and it replaced the original position, which is that you quarantine the known sick, and then isolate people that are high risk. There was this speculative idea based, again, on speculative models that a population-wide lockdown could stop a pandemic. And so that was basically a policy waiting for an opportunity to test it. And then you had the role of social media and media in this case. Unlike the swine flu in 2009, we had social media, we had smartphones that had nothing like the penetration that it has now. Now we are in a media situation in which some obscure event can happen on the street in China, a man fall over and die. Somebody gets it on their camera, they post it to Instagram, it's suddenly on CNN, and an extreme outlier event gets taken by the public to be a representative event. So that's really what happened. It was this bad lockdown policy really waiting in the wings until we had the next crisis, and we ended up with a kind of a media-induced crisis. And that's why so many public health officials said, well, shut everything down. They had been told, okay, the models tell us this is the way to stop the virus.
Yeah, but that is totally irresponsible, not only irresponsible of the management of the government, and irresponsible of the media, but if it's not accountability, this thing is going to become a charade. Every time that we have a cold, it's going to be closing the whole country. So we become a political tool and will become also a health tool. I think what needs to happen is I gotta believe how it's possible that a media can go ahead and create an issue like that, and the government cannot go and remove their license. If you remove the license of Facebook or Google or Twitter, you will see an immediate correction of their actions. But this thing that is being practically protected by a political, in both sides, by political tool, I think is immoral.
I think you're right. I think how we deal with it politically as a policy matter, I think, is going to be the key question in 2021, because the reality is that the media seems to be able to act with impunity. I mean, they have effectively terrified the entire public. The media, they didn't think, okay, I want to portray this in the most accurate and scientifically sound way. Instead, every morning, they just essentially wake up and function to terrify the public. And until enough of the public realize that's what's happening and can resist it, we won't be in the position to even discuss it. But I think we're going to have that discussion. The media is morally culpable in large part for the panic.
Why they cannot remove the license?
Sort of basic legal difficulties, though. I do think when it comes to social media platforms, the social media platforms are supposed to be neutral. Unfortunately, as we've discovered, they very often exercise the editorial judgment and biases of a publisher. Well, if they're going to act like a publisher, they should have to deal with the legal repercussions that publishers have to deal with.
It sounds to me like that's going to be politicized for quite some time. Thank you, Jay Richards, for being on the show.
My pleasure.
And thank you for watching American Medicine Today.